question to you is, what are the negative impacts of loneliness on both the individual, so at an individual level, and also sort of at an organisational level?
I think I've got
Oh, this is to amplify.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Well, this is the report that we have published. But Sharon, in response to your question, a person who feels lonely feels alone. They emotionally feel drained. They often, it means that their aloneness becomes a mental health issue. They feel disengaged. They feel like nobody understands them. And the nature of the epidemic which you raise is an interesting one, because we have an emerging epidemic just in the community. Yeah. Nearly 51% of the Australian community, when they were interviewed last week, when the report was done, indicated that they felt lonely. So in the workplace, we're following it a little bit behind. So the negative impacts, as I've described, we've got a community expectation, and the reason for that, I believe, is that we don't have a groundedness. We don't have a central way in which we can actually come together. So organisationally, what it means is when people are feeling lonely in the workplace, they feel that it is something that they are doing tasks but not relating. So if there was a headline of this report, the headline is this: that we are becoming so transactional that we've lost the ability to be relational. And when you go to a busy office environment, you look at it, but if you look at it differently through looking at the way in which people are working, you'll actually be able to identify people who are lonely. And interestingly, in this report, we found that people who had experienced being alone or lonely, I easily identify people who are lonely as well. So they've got some experience to work from.
This might be a question that some of us may be thinking, how would you identify that someone is lonely in your own workplace?
There's a very interesting response that one of the companies that I interviewed, who has an outstanding capacity to bring people together, it has two rules, not rules, they call them behaviours in their organisation. The two rules are this: they don't talk culture, they don't talk anything else except these two behaviours. First one is you wash your own coffee cup, and the second one is you never eat alone. And what that means is that this particular company means that people take personal responsibility by washing their own coffee cup, so it's indicative of something bigger. And you never eat alone means that everybody is looked out for. So it's conceptually, how do you identify people? You look for people who look like they are lonely. And I know that the question will be, well, what do we do about it? But these people are people who tend not to be invited to things or tend not to respond to events. It's all very easy to have people who want to run around in running clubs around the Tan, or go walking groups, or go to a film night, or run around the Hyde Park. But they're the people who would naturally do that anyway. I'm trying to avoid the word introvert, because often the word introvert tends to be those people who may identify as being alone or lonely. But many introvert people are very happy being introverts. And it's a skill or a technique or just an intuitive ability to be able to identify those people who are feeling lonely.
I guess perhaps having personal relationships with people in your office helps in that sense, just to get a sense of where people's communities are outside of work as well. But my next question to you would be, so what are some of the ways that Australian companies, how are they addressing this issue, and are they addressing this issue?
The answer to the last part of that question is no, they're not, because we've become so focused around work that it's around profits, it's around results, it's around KPIs, it's around KRAs, it's around let's get the job done as quickly as we can at all cost. And I see people nodding as I say that. And the reality is that by its very nature and you're focusing on the future of work, I think this particular report, it just goes right to the heart of what we need to do, where we need to humanise work. We need to bring back into work the reality that it is humanity that we need to be caring for, not the end result. So let me give you some practical examples. There's a law firm in this town, a very large law firm, that says that if you need to talk to somebody or email somebody or speak to somebody, a floor above you or a floor below you, you have to get out of your desk and go and speak to them. So it actually forces people to actually look people in the eye and become relational. And the power of that is enormous. Another example is the one around never eat alone at your desk. Another way in which some companies are doing this is to actually say, to have people buddy up. And the problem with inductions that I've identified is that inductions, you tend to, when people come into an organisation, they have a person who they respond to and then they move on. But there's one company that says that we'll have a buddy, but it's a buddy for the whole of your time here within the organisation. So at all times you have somebody that you can relate to. So coming back to the essence of what it's about, it's around capturing within the future of work the fact that what we need to do is become humane again. There's an amazing piece of work that was done by Harvard Business Review that said that what we need to do is recapture the concept of kindness. Now just pause on that, because when we start to think about that, it starts to talk about gospel principles. Another element that was identified in this extensive Harvard review, and it was done by the Surgeon General of the US, in the US government, and he basically said that we have an epidemic of loneliness in the workplace, and chronic epidemic is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So we're now moving into a realm where, as Christians, we need to identify what it means to be kind to one another, an expression of kindness. We need to care for one another and genuinely and authentically care for one another. And we need to express compassion. Now, these are the outcomes of a Harvard review. Non-religious, non-Christian, the reality check is that this is what's been identified as what will make the difference in the workplace as we go forward.
So perhaps going to an earlier point you made about how companies are wanting to do things better, faster, in less time. How do you see the connection between technology and how dehumanising it may be on our workforces?
We did an interesting study last year on the gig economy. It was called Precarious Insights. And what came out of that study was that it basically said, one of the basic findings was that if people have this underlying expectation, because I'm connected, I'm engaged. And the reality is you can have 500 people on your Facebook or your Instagram and be very lonely, because it's a transactional relationship. It's not a heart-to-heart relationship. It's not a heartbeat to heartbeat. It's not a spirit to spirit. And the fact is we've got to recapture the concept of community within the workplace. And community is about talking with somebody, shaking somebody's hand, sitting down, sharing what's on your heart and on your mind together. But technology in the precarious work insight really was very significant, because it basically gave the impression that because we use technology, that we are actually able to be engaged authentically with one another. Reality check, it's not true, not true. Just an example, I was with a person at a large bank, and I was sitting on 3 floors where they have hot desks. And I said to him, this 27-year-old, I said to him, what is it about your work that really you like? He said, well, on the one hand, I like the flexibility of my own time, but on the other hand, I really don't know anybody. I said, well, tell me what that means. He said, well, I can work from anywhere I like in Australia. I could be anywhere. I can work 24 hours, so long as I get my KPIs done. But the reality is I come to the hot desks just to actually talk to somebody who has part of my world. And I said, so tell me what that looks like. He said, well, I'll sit next to somebody here, but then the reality was I may never see that person again. And so for him, the flexibility on the one hand was good, but the paucity for him was the fact that he didn't know people. It's a matter of knowing people on your Instagram, but do you really know people?
So as Managing Director of an HR think tank, from your position and also your perspective as a Christian, how can we be part of the solution?
Interestingly enough, in this study, I asked for 400 Christians to actually respond to the same questions as the 1,000 people, 1,000 workers in Australia, just to identify whether there was a difference. Here's the interesting point. It was marginally different, positively, only marginally. So I think there's something underlying there that we shouldn't take for granted, that people in this room may actually feel lonely in the workplace. So just pause that button. So what can we do? I think it is genuinely and sincerely and authentically take an interest in people. For them as themselves, not for them as part of the task. And I think the humanity that we need to recapture is exactly that. And if you look at my LinkedIn, there's an amazing story, amazing visual of a Thailand police station where a young man came in with a knife and was pointing a knife at a very big burly Thai policeman in the police station. And basically all the Thai policeman was sitting on the desk and basically asked him why he came in. And the fact is that he was in enormous distress. The quick outcome of the story was he actually took the knife from him and gave him a hug, and he cried on the basis that nobody had ever done that before. And interestingly enough, the response to that, when I put my response to it, the fact that we need to recapture the sense of humanity, genuinely and authentically, the response has been amazing. It's an example of what it means for us as Christians to actually be Christians in the workplace. Kindness, compassion, caring. There was an article written by a general in the army who identified this as a major issue, and he actually used the word love in the American at West Point. He said we need to recapture the word love when we talk to people. So I think we need to look out for people. We need to express genuine sincerity in our relationships, and we need to avoid the concept that we get sucked into being transactional.
That's brilliant. On that note, let's thank Lindsay for his time and his sharing.